Whether you're a lifelong keeper or just getting started, help us encourage responsible keeping, conservation, and public education in the interest of keeping our reptiles safe and healthy as we protect them for future generations. You're invited to spend time with us as we experience these awesome animals together on Intrepid Exotics. Hey everybody, welcome back again. And I say again because Jeremy and we just sat here and talked for an hour, and I didn't even press record. So we're on round two.
Round two. Welcome back again and again and again.
Exactly. Gotta love it. See what happens when you get old, man. It's creeping up on you. For those of you guys that don't know, Jeremy Turgeon, Brassman Reptiles. He's actually former operations manager for New England Reptile and currently the newest member of the team with USARK. He's officially a USARK guy now.
Yeah.
So we're all really happy about that, especially out here in North Carolina.
Heck yeah.
We've got our own USARK guy now. Love it.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited about it, super happy about it. Basically, my official title is not designated just yet, mostly because my position holds multiple spots, so I'm doing a lot of stuff, so we've got to come up with the official title, but I'll certainly be doing some social media stuff. I'll be working on some digital media things that you may see in a newsletter. You may also see some stuff printed out that's on a USARK booth at a show. And I'll also be acting as yet another buffer between industry and Phil. As we'll talk about some of these alerts. Phil's the guy that spearheads writing all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And we're just getting started into the year, which means we're going to start seeing some things pop up, and he's the guy that does all that writing. So, and he's the one that's going to Capitol Hill and doing all these things. So we want his time to be able to be focused on that. More so than having to answer emails and things like that. So I'll be a buffer between industry and Phil. And of course, if it's something that needs his attention, we get it to him. But some other things, like if people just have general questions or, exactly like what we're doing here, making a video to talk about these alerts. A lot of times people are just like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I want to make sure I have the right talking points. They can reach out to me. And we'll make sure that you've got all that information so you can make a video and help spread the word, because that's what we need. That's exactly what we need. Yeah, we need everybody that's got a platform to be doing something, getting the message out there, getting the alerts out there. Exactly.
And it will be good having somebody like you picking up some of that slack too, because I know before I'd put out anything really important. And there we go. Now we're gonna have camera issues. Check this out. Camera's probably getting tired, right? But I would text or call Phil and say, hey man, what's your stance on that? What's the important things I need to hit on? And that's a really good resource to have, especially if you want to make sure you're putting out the right information. So definitely will be a big benefit, having you picking some of that stuff up.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I'm excited to be able to do it, and excited to be able to play a part in making sure the industry is safe.
Right. Yeah, we've got a lot of things going on starting out here in the new year, man. Between the stuff kicking off in Florida again and the stuff in Louisiana.
Yep, exactly. It's only just begun. I know I had said right before Christmas when we saw the Louisiana thing come up, I was like, man, we can't even get through the holidays before these guys are throwing stuff at us, so it's again, like I said, the first part of the year, this is when we see the most kind of stuff coming in, and so we just want to make sure we're ahead of as much as possible and just preparing ourselves mentally for a new year and some new battles.
Right. And it's an election year too, so it tends to leave the legislators a little bit more open to their constituents.
Yep.
Which kind of leans into the letter writing and the phone calls and things like that. They're going to have a little bit more impact around this time of year than they would if they'd just been elected into office. They got 3 years to go, and they're hoping everybody forgets about everything that they screw up by the time election year comes around.
It's a wonderful cycle, politics.
I know, right? That's why that's one of the topics we're never supposed to talk about, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
gosh.
But yeah, man, again, I really want to appreciate this. This is a testament to how easygoing Jeremy is. Because like I said, we just sat here and covered all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And he hasn't called me one derogatory name yet.
Not yet. I'll submit my official comments. Deadline's not quite here yet.
We'll have a Facebook brawl about it later.
Oh gosh. No, man, it's cool. And this is important stuff, man. You know, this really is. I mean, right off the rip, we've got Florida wanting to expand their ban on the green iguana and focus it on all iguana species. So this is House Bill 1033.
Right.
So it's expanding the ban on green iguanas to be all iguana species. So that's rock iguanas, Lewis-eye hybrids, that kind of stuff, rhino iguanas, spiny-tailed iguanas. They're now going to be prohibited species. And that's, incredibly frustrating. So it's going to change that statute from green iguana to just iguana. And that's insane.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, which is also interesting that it's just in the same bill, it's going to ban the sale of dogs and cats in pet shops. Which is
was crazy.
It's just a bizarre thing to throw in there.
Yeah, I think we had mentioned it's probably most of PETA probably retired down to Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what it sounds like.
Right, exactly. So the bill has been profiled. So the legislative session in the state doesn't happen until January 9th, which is next week. But it means right now, like this is just the very first step. Certainly it's scary to know that the bill would take effect as soon as July 1st. Which is insane, which is why it's really important to be paying attention to USARK and of course USARK Florida. That's the whole reason they exist, is because Florida is such a unique entity in and of itself. So if you're watching USARK, certainly thank you. We'll definitely keep you up to date, but also make sure you're tuned into USARK Florida to see what's going on there. And especially those of us in the Southeast, we know, what happens in Florida oftentimes starts trickling upwards. So stuff like this could have quite a large impact on a lot of us up here.
Yeah, definitely could. And it's one of the things for those of you guys that aren't familiar, there's a USARK National and USARK Florida. They're two separate entities, but what we run into is Florida has got such an easily accessible ecosystem for reptiles. Florida has got so many more things going on. Their state USARK is really active. Daniel and Elizabeth, them down there, man, they're always hopping. Matter of fact, when we get done here, I'm going to shoot Daniel over a text and see if he wants to come on and talk about some of the specifics that they've been working on. Try and get that done here in the next couple of days, so that if there's any emails, letters, things like that folks need to get out, we can definitely get his input and see how we can best impact that.
Absolutely. And I mean that's the biggest thing is once we know what the quote unquote plan of attack is, we really just have to rally the troops and make our statements known. Certainly they have a new executive director at Florida Fish and Wildlife, and he's seemingly been quite receptive to communicating and talking with USARK Florida. So I'm sure there'll be some way of communicating with him as well. I'm sure his email is easily accessible, and just as many fronts as possible. Obviously we'll have a direct definitive target on who to be reaching out to, soon once it's been assigned to a committee, but in the meantime, as we sit tight, like it's definitely important to note that we at least have some communication that's able to be connected with Florida Fish and Wildlife. When we move forward and we know exactly who we need to be communicating to, like it's very important. This is big. We're talking about a blanket ban on all iguanas.
That's like shutting down iguana land.
A frustrating thing indeed. The green iguana thing was frustrating enough.
Right.
You're talking about such a common species, and certainly, like we had talked before, when we talk about something like the green iguanas, you can drive through Florida and you'll see green iguanas for sure.
Right.
You're not seeing rock iguanas. You're not seeing rhino iguanas. And it's important to note too, again, USARK Florida exists because Florida is such a unique space, but it's important to note because such a big topic in Florida is invasive species. Oftentimes we're talking about species that couldn't thrive outside of southern Florida. Right. So when we're talking about these statewide regulations and stuff, like it becomes frustrating because folks that live in Gainesville, Florida, or, just North Florida in general, they're not having these same issues, that Miami and Homestead and the Glades and, like stuff like that are certainly dealing with. Right. And of course, it always comes to ask, are things, when things are talked about publicly, like on news sites and stuff like that, is it being, exploited for something larger than it may actually be? Which you were saying, you've spoken with some ecologists out there that are like, that's, it is a problem, but it's not the monster or mammoth that may be getting spoken about. So, it's just important to note that, while Florida is a unique case, it's also not the entire state. It's not like you cross the line into Florida and suddenly you see giant pythons and iguanas and all that stuff right when you pass into North Florida.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that, one of the reasons why I got my little Burmese python out here tonight was just to kind of show some folks that, like you say, they're down there. It's clickbait. It's drawing attention. It gets media attention, but the killer Burmese pythons that they're talking about, even one this size, it's a couple of years old, is lunch for everything down there, man.
Right.
I mean, this animal's not going to be killing too much. They've got a tough time making it to adulthood.
Yeah.
The fish, the birds, the mammals, everything eats these things.
That's
so
true.
They're, I would venture to guess they're a bigger food source than Florida is giving them credit for being. And and like I say, we need some realistic outside people going out there and doing a research and getting a real, you get people that they live in a retirement community and they're like, well, I haven't seen a raccoon in 2 years. Well, what, you've been outside 3 times in that time? How much time do you actually spend in the Everglades, butt deep in swamp water, looking for raccoons?
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah, well, I saw it on Facebook.
Yeah, well, there it is. Yeah, it is on the neighborhood watch page. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
No, so it's true, man. It's true.
A lot to it.
Yeah, and I think another thing to point out there as well is, we're talking, often we've found or seen the stories of, pythons being found in the Everglades, larger pythons and some females that have been gravid and stuff like that. And, with a large, clutch of eggs, but, and that's what catches people's attention, right? Because we're talking about the invasive species and, oh my God, it's having all these babies and all this stuff. The reality is, those animals have those large clutches in twofold. One, because it's a large animal, so it's able to carry that capacity. But two, because just as you said, they're a large food source. So, maybe 1% of those animals will make it to adulthood. You know,
Right.
so think about that. If a snake lays 100 eggs, that means one animal will successfully reach, you know, adulthood.
Mhm.
You know, so on average, if you imagine that, you know, 1 to 2 animals maybe will make it to maturity and adulthood.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
you
Nest
know, just
rates and all that. I mean, the eggs get eaten too before they even hatch.
exactly,
And then once they
exactly. So
hatch,
there's
they're fishing bait.
right. So it's there's a lot more than just like big snake lays lots of eggs. Then there's lots of other big snakes outside. Like it doesn't quite work that way.
Right. So yeah, that'll be, and you know, it's kind of disappointing to see that coming through because, you know, especially with that thing with the white throat monitor that was out there not too long ago.
Mhm.
Um, you know, my understanding was that, you know, they issued the verbal moratorium, you know, across the board, don't kill anything unless it's been hit by a car and it's a humane act or, you know, exigent
Right.
circumstances is how he phrased it. But, um, you know, I was a little glad to hear that when they were approached with it and USARK Florida brought that to him saying, hey, you know, you said you weren't going to kill anything and
Right.
you went and killed this animal. It was clearly not invasive. It was somebody's pet. The director said that he was going to, you know, he was apologetic about it, was my understanding. And he's like, okay, well,
Right.
I'm going to get this written into policy
Right.
officially, you know? So, I mean, that's a step in the right direction. Sometimes
Right.
you got to forgive mistakes, um, you know, after you address them and they get fixed and things like that in a big organization. But
Right.
then to see him follow up with this total ban like this after taking a little bit of good faith effort and a conversation is, I don't know. Like I said, it'll be real interesting to see what Daniel and Elizabeth have been speaking with them directly about, you know?
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's important to note that it was introduced by State Rep Sam Kilbrew. So that's not to say that you know, Fish and Wildlife is not involved, because obviously they're paying attention to what's happening. But
Right.
you know, it wasn't directly proposed by them, so you know, who knows?
Okay.
Maybe it's somebody that's, you know, looking for that vote. You know, that's like, oh, if I push
Yeah.
this one through, you know, we just don't know. And you know, certainly if you have Daniel on, you know, I'm sure he'll have a lot more insight. He's probably been having conversations with folks that, you know, I don't even know about, you know,
Right.
as far as what's going on. Because like I said, the legislative session doesn't start till next week, you know, so who knows who people are talking to or speaking with during the holidays and anything like
Right.
that. So but
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully there's able to be a conversation with the new executive director, and for him to be like, yeah, we're, you know, not necessarily for this, which would be great. It would be
Yeah.
wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, it's my understanding he's been going to reptile expos and talking with breeders and talking with keepers and things like that. So, I mean, it looks
Yeah.
like he's making a good faith effort.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, which is great, because it's been a while.
mm-hmm.
It's definitely been a while. So it was a nice change of pace. I remember speaking with Elizabeth and Daniel shortly after the new executive director took over, and they were like, we had a great conversation, and
Yeah.
you know, we're going to hope for the best, you know,
Right.
and that has so far seemingly been pretty good.
Right.
You know, mistakes included, you know, at least owning up to those mistakes and making sure that they don't happen again. Like these are all good things for sure. So
Right.
hopefully there's some conversations that can be had that don't necessarily immediately put us to ease, but at least, you know, give us a little comfort in knowing, like, you know,
Right.
they've got our back, or they're at least, you know, hearing our concerns, you know,
Right.
and seriously taking them into consideration, instead of just, you know, going about their business as we've
Yeah.
seen in the past.
Yeah. That was, I'd had I'd forgotten until now. I'd actually talked with Daniel right after that white throat monitor incident. I was thinking about putting out a video on it, and then John from Tipping Scales ended up putting one out.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it was good. It covered. I mean, he did a good job on it. I just shared that video around. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the gist of what Daniel was saying. Is like, you know, make sure we're telling people, don't spoil the relationship that we're building over this. You know, we still want to be, you know, polite and as forgiving as we can because things are moving forward and stuff like that. And of course, a lot of people still pissed about what happened, but like I said, positive about it. But I mean, that too, I mean, it drives home the importance of doing the educational programs. It's one of the keeps me motivated for going out, doing museums and parks and stuff like that. Because you don't know when your councilman, your representative is going to end up at one of those events. Somebody that could potentially be voting on reptile legislation who's never seen one before in their life. And all they see is python hunter stuff. And they're like, oh, yeah, ban those things, man. They're deadly. They'll kill you. And then, they may vote a little bit differently if they've had an opportunity to actually have their kid walk up and grab a 16, 18-foot python, and see how we interact with our animals and everything in person and show them that they're not all man-eaters and killers and stuff like that. So,
exactly.
It's just as important as getting the letters out and stuff like that. If we can get good, responsible people doing more of these things, get more of those folks involved in it,
Right. Yeah, 100%. And exactly to that point too, like establishing that relationship to be able to have, that communication, be it, a USARK representative with that person, or just a solid, sound reptile keeper that's just like, hey, like you should get the chance to experience one of these animals. Like come by, come over, or, we're going to be doing an educational event. We'd love to have you over, I remember when I was still living in Massachusetts, they were working on repopulating the timber rattlesnake in Mass, which they're incredibly endangered in the state. And they were looking at an isolated island that was supposed to be off limits to the public to work on slowly building a new population. And the public was losing their mind, and there's all the rattlesnake myths, popped out and everything. And the senator that was kind of spearheading that at the time happened to show up at an event that I wasn't even doing reptile stuff at. I was actually doing music stuff at. Yeah. But my booth was set up right next to his booth. So when we had some downtime, I was like, nice. Come on over, Senator. Let's have a quick chat,
Right.
And, I understood where, because they decided to pull some of the funding and stuff like that. And I couldn't understand why. I'm like, we're talking about repopulating a species that's already here. It already lives here. Like we're not talking about releasing 30,000 of them. We're talking about maybe 100 individuals on a huge, range.
Right.
So the chance of you running into them is almost nil. But, of course, there's the public safety thoughts and blah, blah, blah. And all of those people are concerned about taking their hikes. They want to be safe on those hikes because, bears don't exist. But, of course, they make their voices known. And those were kind of like the dissuading factors when he was considering, pulling the funding. And I was just like, man, this doesn't make any sense. And I kind of laid it out to him. And he was like, well, you're quite well read on the subject. And I was like, I'd love to have you over my place sometime. Come see 150 snakes. Let me take you to Nerd. Let's go play with some timber rattlesnakes in person, because I don't know if you've ever seen one, and, being able to have that conversation with him was quite wonderful. Just to be able to be like, hey man, like I understand you're doing your job and you're paying attention to your constituents, but also I want to make sure that you're educated on this as much as possible. And he was quite receptive to just taking that information into account. So again, establishing that connection, it really, really, really is a vital part of making sure that we keep ourselves safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was initially having the conversation out at the museum here, when I was talking with the director, I told her, I was like, I really encourage you, get the mayor down here, get the city council down here, get all of those folks down here so they can get hands-on and they can see exactly. And we had so many people come through there. And I think people get intimidated by doing this stuff because they think, oh, a senator, I've got to be a PhD to talk to him. And you don't. You don't even have to talk politics with them if you're not comfortable with it. All you got to do is show them the animals, show them how you interact with them.
Yep, exactly.
Show them that they're safe to work with and stuff like that. Because that's enough a lot of times to break the stereotype because people will see it. I mean, I know you've seen it a million times. People are terrified of them. And next thing you know, they're around their neck going, man, this thing's cool.
Exactly.
They'll come back on in a second, damn thing.
There we go. But yeah, no, man.
Just get hot.
Yeah. But no, it's true, man. I mean, we used to see it all the time at Nerd when we did tours and stuff with people. And, obviously I've been to the Reptarium a bunch and during open hours and seeing the people come in that are like, no, I could never touch a reptile. I'm here because my kid likes them. Like, I don't want to be around, before they walk out the doors, they've had something in their hand,
right?
And like, you're planting the seed, and that's what it's all about, right? Like that exposure, that moment, because you get your hands on something like that. Now you care about it. You've got a better understanding of it, and you want to make sure it's around,
right?
That's what we're trying to do, because the general public looks at what we do and looks at the animals we work with, and they think like we're a bunch of crazy people. And the reality is we are, but the snakes are okay.
The animals are cool.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
The animals are typically the only thing that makes us socially acceptable. This is how I connect and anchor myself to realities, because all my animals. So you guys should really appreciate them.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Combat engineer running around the civilian world detached from reality, you got problems.
Oh man, too true, man.
But it's good stuff. And let me see. Yeah. Let's go ahead and hit the trying to remember if there's anything else on educational stuff I wanted to hit. Yeah, I mean, for anybody watching this, as we talk about this educational stuff, if there's anything that you want to know about how to get started with it and things like that, by all means, hit me up. I've got a couple videos out there about events that we've done, and I'm more than happy to help you guys get started doing that stuff. Just don't go out half-assed, half-cocked, and do anything silly that you're not prepared to handle.
Yes. Absolutely.
Definitely call me first before you go out, because we don't need anybody mishandling animals at shows or with the public and stuff like that. And
right,
bad press is bad.
Yeah, exactly.
So like I said, we'll get in touch with Daniel and see if we can get specifics on Florida. Now, the national alert that's come out for Louisiana, is long. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's a doozy.
I'm going to go ahead and just pull this up real quick and shoot up to the top of it. And before we start digging into it too much, let me get back here to the homepage so you guys, for those of you guys that aren't familiar, get familiar.
Simple as that.
It is. Go to the USARK homepage, start reading through it. I'm going to have all the links to all of this stuff down in the description of the video. And there's a point that we can make here. We've got, here's the alert for Florida, and the alert for Louisiana. Phil does a really good job of going through this legislation and breaking it down, kind of condensing it into the high points. But I want to ask you guys really quick, how many of you would jump into this document, just find it on your own, and start reading through it? And I'm just going to scroll all the way to the end of it. Well, you can see the scroll wheel on the screen there.
Yeah.
See how far it goes.
That's a lot of
this stuff. See, this is the kind of stuff that we all support USARK for, that, we all contribute to, because these guys go through this stuff. This is just for one state. There's 49 other states that they go through, spend just enormous amounts of time going through this legislation and catching stuff before it's a law. So,
yep. And Phil has done such a great job at condensing this, because Lord, man, I would have probably fallen asleep reading that.
Right.
Reading the official document. It's a challenge. And this is, again, this is why following USARK is so important. Mm-hmm. Because first of all, the chances of you finding that document in general is probably slim to none. unless you're really dialed into state politics.
Mm-hmm.
So you not only have that documentation found for you, you have it simplified for you.
Mm-hmm.
And Phil is incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to understanding that jargon, what it means, how the legal processes work. So when one of these alerts goes up, note two things. One, you don't have to read the confusing, nonsensical format of legal chaos that ensues. And two, everything's spelled out for you. Mm-hmm. What's written in the context of what's in the document, but also who to contact, how to contact them. Like everything you could have questions for is being provided, and that's the most important thing. Because that's the bulk of the work, right? Like sending an email, making a phone call, sending something like that. That's the last bit of the work to be done. Everything else has been taken care of, and everything else is a lot more labor intensive.
Right.
And especially with this, I mean, so this is a total overhaul of herp regulations in the state. I mean, there's 13 points of the main changes. Which is insane. I mean, we're talking like a total overhaul. Just to touch on a couple, the term restricted snakes now means snakes longer than 8 feet and listed venomous snakes not listed as prohibited. Contrary to current regulation, this permit will be required for species that can reach over 8 feet, not just individual snakes that are longer than 8 feet. So we're talking about whole species. Yeah. So if you own a carpet python, you got to get the permit, and if you own a berm or something, anything that's over 8 feet. You need this regardless. It's not just for the one animal, it's for the entire species. So and people who are in possession of these restricted species will have 120 days from when it goes into effect to register those animals and acquire a permit. So it's one of those things like don't wait till the last minute. Just get it locked in. So there's, again, we're talking about a lot of different species. We've got some banned species now. So we're talking about the black and white tegu, Savannah monitor, green iguana, the Burmese python, the brown anole, which is laughable. And then some various venomous snakes, Cuban tree frog, cane toad, African clawed frog. The Argentine black and white tegu is a thing. Those of us in the Southeast, we've seen this pop up, obviously originally in Florida, and then within just a couple of years, we've seen it trickle up into other states in the Southeast. So when we mention legislation, starting in one place and going to other places because they pay attention, we're being pretty serious about that. And the black and white tegu and the Burmese python are two great examples of that.
I had to get my tegu permit for North Carolina here.
Exactly. So then we have some other species that are going to be labeled as restricted, so they can be possessed but only with a permit. So that's the Asian water monitor, brown tree snake, brown basilisk, the Gray's American spiny-tailed iguana, the northern curly-tailed lizard, and Peter's rockagama. So, and one of the things that I appreciate a lot about USARK is when there's points that are valid and points to support, they get noted. It's not just all about this is all bad, this is blah, blah, blah. So noted is a point of support that is unlawful to release within state captive or wild native or non-native reptiles and amphibians from within or outside the state unless approved and permitted by the department. I think we can all agree. Don't release your pets outside.
Right.
There's certainly plenty of amnesty programs, reptile rescues, stuff like that you can find if absolutely necessary.
Yep.
So definitely a point to support for sure. And I think also important to note when we're talking about stuff like this and things to support, USARK is always going to be for the sensible things, right? So when it comes to like permitting for things like venomous reptiles or crocodilians, like these kind of things just kind of make sense because they don't need to be in everybody's hands.
Right.
And, while it's not like there's a huge, supply of people, just sending out venomous reptiles or crocodilians, it's one of those things where, because it isn't an animal for everyone, something like a permit that has, some kind of requirements. You have to jump through a couple hoops, to ensure that you're going to provide that animal with what it needs is something sensible that I think the vast majority of us as keepers would be okay with.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% behind somebody. If you're going to keep cobras or crocodiles and things like that at your house, somebody needs to check and make sure that all your birds are chirping upstairs,
right?
Because not only are you a risk to yourself, if you don't care for them right, you don't house them right, you're a risk to your family. If you want to start showing them off to your friends and they come over and something happens, so I mean you do have a bit of a responsibility to the community there. So I'm just behind and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, exactly.
But the thing that scares keepers about permits though is it's not always the permit process, it's the execution of it. It's the staff, and that's one of the things that I had talked about a few days ago was, Chris Coffey was permitted. He was doing everything he could. He was trying to do everything right. And FWC screwed him. They cost the lives of a bunch of his animals. And, so most keepers are like, yeah, the consensus is, yeah, you guys are going to want me to get permits this year. Next year, you're going to change the laws. You're going to come in, confiscate, and kill my animals.
Right. And it is a genuine concern. 100% across the board. And because those of us that have been involved with USARK and USARK Florida, like we've seen all of this. So even when other states are proposing regulations and bans and stuff, it becomes a genuine nationwide concern. Even if their state Fish and Wildlife Service is not acting in the same manner, it's still concerning. It is certainly still concerning. I mean, heck, this overhaul is kind of coming out of nowhere from Louisiana.
All right.
I mean, and it's got some big changes. Certainly as we continue going down on this, there's some changes. There's a lot of changes to the housing and maintenance section of the regulation. Phil noted a few of them. But one of them, and this was a big one for me, was that they are saying that portable water shall be accessible at all times and appropriate to meet the daily requirements. This is something that can cause diseases for certain species. If you keep a lot of desert species that have 0 to 10% humidity in an enclosure, so you've got maybe a couple of high-powered heat bulbs and stuff like that. You have a decent sized water bowl that's now evaporating, generating this humidity that could pose problems. It can create fungal infections and just be problematic, skin infections. So these things can be incredibly problematic. And we're talking about stuff like that. A lot of times we're talking about like small gecko species, that are not going to fare well with those kind of health issues. And they're also not going to fare well if they're being pulled out of that enclosure to go to a vet because of something like that. So treatment and stuff like that is also just going to be something that stresses them out even more, and they do very poorly with. So also there are certain species that also really don't utilize water bowls. If you think about something like a crested gecko, or actually a lot of arboreal gecko species in general,
Right.
That's why we mist them. That's why we have misting systems, because that's the way that they drink. They are visual cue animals, to where they need to see water dripping down something to want to be able to go to it, versus standing water in a bowl. That, again, if humidity is being kind of captured, because a lot of those species need higher humidity. So if we're talking about air that's a little bit more stagnant, we're talking about development of bacteria growth and all these things that can create respiratory issues. And we're talking about certain species that are more sensitive than others.
Mm-hmm.
If that happens and then you need to take it to the vet or something like that, that animal has a greater chance of failing to thrive, because now it's being stressed out even more. So you're messing with its immune system while it's already being compromised.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one. Also, we're talking about enclosure length. They're proposing certain minimum enclosure sizes, and this gets a little problematic when we go back to the top statement of that there's no known impact to businesses. If you're a reptile breeder and you're utilizing rack systems, especially if you're like a ball python guy, if you use something like an ARS tub, their 5540 series tub, let's just say, that's got a little bit more of a narrow end on that width.
Right.
So chances are, if you've got a larger ball python, it doesn't meet that 1/3 length of the shortest side, or in height either. We talk about tubs.
Right.
So, but we're also talking about a species that over years has proven to do quite well in tubs. So when we're talking about somebody who's potentially feeding their family, breeding snakes, this is a huge impact for them.
Absolutely.
And we could certainly go down the racks versus cages debate, because this does open up a can of, those cans of worms when we start talking about enclosure sizes, but the point being, when we have these umbrella attempted regulations, oftentimes we're talking about issues where we think the reptile industry is only this big because it's unknown. So it's like, oh, I walked into Petco and I saw a ball python, a corn snake, a leopard gecko, a crested gecko, and maybe a chameleon nowadays, and that's pretty much it. And you think, oh, well, that's all that exists in the industry. And the reality is, no, there's quite a bit more now, but the general public doesn't necessarily know that, because all they see is what's in that local Petco or PetSmart or something like that.
Exactly. I mean, I can appreciate the spirit of that, wanting to make sure that they're well maintained, but if you're going to be writing laws, you've got to be specific. And, specificity is important when you're talking about all those different species and so forth. Just like you said, can't go and, write this into the law really vague and then go in and see somebody taking care of a species you're not familiar with. You see it different than the law reads. Okay, well, here's a violation. Well, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. Which goes back to everybody's fear of how well the laws would be executed in the first place,
Right. Exactly. So it just poses a lot of concerns, and as you said, that maybe proposed in good spirit, with wanting to ensure that animals are maintained appropriately. But there's a greater impact, again, especially in businesses, which, for them to say that this has no known impact on small businesses is absolutely ludicrous. But then again, as we said, species specific stuff, this doesn't work with, and that's frustrating. If you're somebody that works with Australian geckos, desert geckos, you're going to be looking at this being like, man, what am I doing? How am I going to handle this? What is now an appropriate water bowl? If your definition of appropriate water bowl is something that the animal can soak in, well, this little gecko from the desert is not soaking in water. It's lapping up the single drop of dew off of a succulent plant that it finds at 7 a.m. So what are we doing? Are we taking a soda bottle cap and putting a tiny drop of water in there? Is that, like what then becomes appropriate, to where we're also not risking the overall health of that animal, and that's where it gets a lot more complicated.
It can definitely get dicey.
Yeah, exactly.
And that kind of ties in too to, the people that are writing this clearly probably don't have that broad of experience, and they may have good intentions with it. It goes back towards being polite when we approach these guys on stuff, because, if they actually have good intentions and they're concerned about the welfare of the animals, if you go in there and politely explain to these folks stuff like we're talking about now, instead of going in and saying, dude, you're a dumbass, it doesn't work for everything. You don't want to start that relationship antagonistically with them. You go in and you have the polite discussions, you send the polite emails and things like that.
Exactly.
To continue to drive home.
Yeah, no, it really is, because again, these people are doing a job, and they're doing a job that has nothing to do with what we do, as keepers or breeders or any of it, and we can't expect them. If you think about what these people have to do for a job, right? Especially if we're talking about like a city council or something like that, there's so many different elements to that job, so many different people to hear. And of course, when we're talking about things that affect us, we think that we're the most important people in the room,
right?
But this person might be on 6 committees, that are all, dealing with different things, and they have to get as well versed in something as possible to be able to make a decision. That's quite frustrating,
right?
So again, just to reiterate one more time, be polite to these people and be professional, because, oftentimes we're talking about, opening a door to communication and education that may end up swaying a vote.
Exactly.
That literally just comes from you submitting a personalized letter, which, USARK has their sample letters that we strongly encourage people to personalize. So we take that, and that opens up a door, where you may get a personalized response from that city council member, from that lawmaker. You never know, to then have a conversation in person, where you can invite them to an educational event that's happening, that you're doing, and just get them to have that real-time moment with an animal that they probably never would have seen before.
Right.
And that matters so much. So yeah, whenever we deal with these kind of things, and, certainly with this, the comment deadline is March 6th.
Right.
So that's not very far away. That's just 2 months away, a little over 2 months away. So we want to make sure that we're submitting our comments, which Phil has already posted who we're submitting to, and how their email address and everything like that. That's the important information that we need. So when we're sending those emails, we want to make sure that we are being polite and just letting this person know, like, hey, we don't necessarily approve of all this.
Right. Yeah.
And there's some issues. Yeah. Like, let's send this back to the drawing board.
Right.
So if we keep scrolling down, there's some more information about turtles and restrictions on commercial take of turtles, and the transportation of animals that are listed under ESA and all that stuff. This is a lot. It really is a lot. We saw you scroll through the entire, full text, and it's pages.
Well, the full text has every species of animal native to Louisiana in it, as best as they could do.
Right. Exactly.
They every one of them.
Right.
So a lot of this stuff is really kind of standard, across the board, what most people do as far as native wildlife and stuff like that.
Right. Exactly. And as you continue to scroll down, again, we've provided the contact information for who we need to be sending emails to, and the sample letter that you can copy and paste, or you can download it. And again, like, we want people to provide a little bit of that personalization. So, you know, we always provide something that's written in a way where if you just want to, you know, copy and paste, sure, it works, but it definitely helps a lot to provide a little bit of that personalization, especially if you work with a species that, you know, like we said, with some of these management practices and maintenance practices that really would impact you, you know, or if you work with a species that's suddenly impacted, you know, talk about that, you know, bring that up, because again, if they're under the assumption that, you know, this isn't going to have a detrimental impact. Yeah. If you're somebody this has a detrimental impact to, they need to hear about it.
Absolutely.
Because they're under the assumption that will not be a thing. You know, so again, you know, kudos to Phil for spelling it all out and giving us the overall synopsis and telling us exactly who to communicate with and send those comments to. So, so we also don't have to go through and try to figure it out through 30 plus pages is what it seems like of legal insanity.
Yeah, I think this wasn't included in that, but I think it goes to what you was just talking about. You know, they've got a family impact statement where they say it won't have any impact on any families in the area. Poverty impact statement saying it won't have any impact on poverty. Doesn't have any impact on providers. And anytime you do anything this broad, you're going to impact, you know, you're always going to impact somebody.
Right. So. Right. Yeah, exactly. And it, you know, I mean, it just goes to show, you know, when we're talking about us as reptile keepers, you know, when we start reaching out to, you know, people on Facebook groups and stuff like that, it seems like there's a lot of us, and the industry is growing tremendously, especially just in the last few years, which is wonderful. But the reality still is, like, we're the black sheep, right? You know, like, we're still the uncommon folks, you know, in comparison to the general public. And you know, I often tell people, you know, if your social media feed is nothing but reptile people, you know, so you see positive things about reptiles all the time, you've got some blinders on if you think the rest of the world thinks the same way. You know, so I encourage people to take a look at, you know, a local news station that may have mentioned something about a reptile. Look at what those comments look like, because they're typically not great.
All you got to do is look at anything that somebody had posted from Ed Tacoa with his kid and snake, and just look at the number of people that are saying he should be in prison.
Yeah, exactly.
The misapprehensions are out there in a big way.
Right. So we need to be doing our best to continue to be educating people, you know, showcasing these animals in a really great light. And we've got so many ways to be able to do that now that, you know, 20 years ago didn't exist. You know, social media, as much as it's a headache at times, you know, provides us a really great resource to be able to educate people on a large scale without much effort. You know, I mean, you know, Tim, you're a great example of it, you know, educating people how to handle a tricky animal, you know, getting picky snakes to eat, like all these things. And you get to do it from the comfort of your own home.
I know, right? It doesn't get any better than that. I just can't wait until I've got more room in my home so I could start putting more animals in my home.
Right.
Out more content.
There you go. But, you know, it's so much easier to do that these days. And, you know, I've certainly found myself scrolling through social media, and you see somebody doing a live stream or something like that, showing off some cool animals. And, you know, you think about the person that's just mindlessly scrolling through social media that comes across that. Like, that's how it happens. And then, you know, you have the chance to spark somebody's interest. You know, and get them involved, and they, you know, you never know who they might be. They might become the next great reptile keeper. They might learn how to breed a Boland's python, you know, something that we've all been trying to figure out. You know, you just never know, you know, and that's the great thing about having the reach, you know, with social media that we have, but is also just a testament to getting these animals in the faces of people and the impact that can have for us in the long run.
Yeah, I've got a lot of people on my channel, a lot of subs that jump down in the comments that had no interest in reptiles whatsoever. They don't have any, they don't keep any. They're just like, man, this kind of cool. I like watching them,
Yeah, exactly. Because think about it, man. Like for us, I had plenty of conversations with Brian Barczyk about this. For us, we spend our days with these animals, right? So like we get kind of numb to it a little bit. Not saying that we lose the interest, but like we're so used to it. It's like, oh, I get to hold a Burmese python every day. I get to go hold this tree boa every day. But for the general public, just getting the chance to see it, in person is enough. Like we're always like, how can I take this to the next level? What interaction can I do? I like, how can I test the boundaries of interaction with my animal? That's us, because we see it all the time. We're living it every day. But the common person who doesn't is just like, whoa, man, I touched that. Like that's crazy.
Man,
you know what I mean?
They love it. It's really cool when we go to events or something, and like the first snake I bring out is my boa, and everybody in the room is like, "Oh my god, that's such a big snake!"
Yeah, man. Yeah, right. Hang on, man. Yeah,
and then you start, I bring out one of my 16-footers, or Cody might bring out one of his 18, 20-footers, and then everybody's like,
"Yep,
oh my
god, yeah."
But the cool thing is that everybody sees how docile they are and how easy they are to work with, and it does so much to shift the perspective of the animals, man. And that's the only, because I mean, if you really think about it, you get outside of the few areas where it's actually possible for a lot of these animals to live in the U.S., the only reason to ban them is unfamiliarity and fear.
It's true.
There's no other legitimate reason to ban them.
It's true.
If you want to start talking about ecological things, we could start banning cats, which is the worst ecological disaster that's hit the planet.
Right.
Pretty much. I mean, they're really the most destructive invasive species on the planet.
They do a lot of damage.
Australia's even making laws about them now.
Right. No, it's true. But again, I mean, and that's harder to do. Because the cute and fuzzy is always, it's in our hearts, and it's really easy to make that Burmese python out to be the boogeyman.
Right.
Giant constrictor snake, like you don't have to do a lot of work to villainize an animal that people are already, on the fence about, or already scared about, so that's why the education just goes so far, because we, that's what changes the minds and gets people to realize, like, no, you know what? They're not that bad. And I tell people all the time, if I have people come by to check out animals or whatever, if they're apprehensive about something, especially like larger constrictors, I'm like, hey, look, you don't have to touch it. You don't, if you look at it and you can appreciate it, cool. That's called step one.
Yeah.
It means the next time you come to my house, you're holding the thing, but
right.
But just to at least have that, like, whoa, like that appreciation of just like, that's a cool animal I've never seen before. That's the foundation of it all, because if you think about it, if you go talk to any reptile keeper, there's always that, like, oh, well, I saw my first blank, my first leopard gecko, or my first ball python, my first retic, whatever. And it's always like, and then I was hooked. You just had to lay eyes on it. Because then when you touch it, it's like, that's the moment when everything sinks in. But that visual, for some people, is just like, I just saw it in a magazine, and thought I needed to figure out how to get one of those, so seeing it is the first step to realizing that, like, no, this stuff is cool, man. These animals just get a bad rap.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, as soon as people tell me, hey, I just got my first ball python, just go ahead and start pawning your furniture now to make room for enclosure.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
Just consolidate your life into one room, because that's all you're gonna have.
Yep.
I mean, that's how it started with me, man. I was doing marine aquariums, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna get a ball python because they're cool.
Yeah,
that was the end of it.
And that's, dude, it's game over. I always tell folks, and people ask me about my history with reptiles, I'm like, man, as soon as my parents let me get my first snake, they knew they made a mistake.
Right. Because I was hooked.
hooked so bad.
Oh yeah. And before I forget too, another quick point, when we're talking about the talking about a lot of the laws that are from a conservation perspective, the captive breeding programs are going to save some species and already have saved some species from extinction. We talked that on the first round. I couldn't remember whether we touched on it this time or not. But I mean, it was just like crested geckos were thought to be extinct not too long ago. And then they started breeding them in captivity, and now it seems like every reptile keeper has got a crested gecko of some sort. You can't walk through a reptile show without seeing tables full of them. And I mean, even Burmese pythons. I mean, although they're invasive in Florida in their natural habitat, they're on the endangered species list as threatened. Because of the skin trades and things like that. Americans think these things are, so all over the place and stuff like that. But, their natural habitats are just getting, destroyed. They're getting hunted down. And there may come a time when the only thing that we've got is what we breed.
It's true. It's sad, but true.
Right.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's conservation through commercialization is a term that's been utilized before, and I mean I think that it's incredibly valid. Because again, until people see them, they get the chance to interact with them. Like that's when you start to care about it, because you see it on TV, and it's wildlife TV is not the same as it used to be. 15 plus years ago, when it was like conservationists going out with Steve Irwin, it was, all this great stuff. And, we don't have that now. Now it's, giant python, man eater or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the verbiage, the narrative has changed, so how we conserve these animals is to get people to have these experiences, and the production of them in captivity and getting them into people's hands. Like that's really how it's been happening. That's how we've grown tremendously over the last handful of years. Certainly thanks to social media and the reach of social media, but you still got to go buy that animal, if you want it. And that's what gets you hook, line, and sinker every time. Because how can you not like these things?
Well, it's one thing that I like too about times like these, just having her out here the whole time. Or when I've got one of my big snakes out and we're flinging them all over the place and trying to catch up with them, and they're trying to get away. But I mean, you see how tolerant and docile and safe they are.
Right.
Because this whole time, this girl's been out and I've been trying to keep her from running away from me. And, she's not tried to bite me once, and she won't.
Right.
We could stay out here another 2-3 hours. The animal perfectly safe. And when she gets 16 feet long, it's going to be the same thing.
Same thing. Exactly.
The only thing it's going to do is, throw your back out a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to do some squats, man. Some forced squats.
Right. Man, I hobbled around after I did that show out in Durham, man. I hobbled for a week.
Oh, I bet.
And it shouldn't be like that. I really need to start doing some sit-ups.
Oh gosh,
because we've had some other requests to do that stuff. I think this summer is going to be pretty busy as far as the events go and stuff like that. So,
which is great.
Yep,
which is great.
Well, we have been on here a long damn time tonight.
Yeah. Right.
But you see, the last round, this is the point where I looked up and said,
"Yeah, right, exactly."
Shoot me. I didn't hit record.
Oh man. Well, we're good this time.
Yes, we are. So fortunately, there's not a whole lot of editing to get this thing thrown up there. And like I said, we'll get a hold of Daniel too and touch on some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll, like I said too, man, Saturday nights, anytime you want to jump on, I'm always doing the live stream at 8 Central. So
heck yeah.
Yeah, if there's anything coming up USARK related you want to jump on and mention, stuff like that, by all means, feel free.
Cool. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you.
And I got to start getting some USARK videos out soon as well.
Yes. Yes. Everybody needs to be talking about USARK all the time.
Yep.
But for good things. Not for crazy alerts. Let's just talk about how great USARK is and that we still have our industry because of it.
Right. Yeah, that'd be a good one to put together, maybe a history. Maybe I'll start researching that and see a history of the biggest fights that USARK's taken on and won, and really drive that point home.
If you want to do something like that, we can. Let's talk about that, because I know Phil has to do like annual reports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they kind of highlight those wins and stuff like that have happened over the years. So we can get some of that information for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, maybe that'll be a good one. We can get all that stuff put together and maybe do something like this and get Phil and Daniel both on and just start
go through it.
Yeah, talking about everything that everybody's done, and get everybody motivated to get on, get that membership. I mean, a basic membership with USARK's only $40 a year, guys. That's a year. True. That's not a month. It's $40 a year.
A year. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. If you eat, you can afford to. If you eat it all during that year, you can afford a USARK membership.
Right. Cue the music for less than a cup of coffee a day.
I know,
you can support USARK.
It really matters, man. Those numbers really, really matter. That's the only teeth that Phil has when he goes down to talk to lawmakers, is how many people are behind us.
Right. And, exactly. Yeah. The memberships mean everything.
Yep.
And look, I always stress to people too, like, obviously everybody's got different financial situations. I think we all know that, especially this day and age. Right. So if you're unable, that's still okay. You can sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter is 100% free and at least keeps you in the know of what's going on. And listen, a share on Facebook, on your Instagram story, an email that you send to somebody is also totally free. And as important as it is to have the numbers and membership, it's also important to get the word out to as many people as possible. So sharing the information, just getting access to the information is already a step in the right direction, just to make sure that we're protecting ourselves. And hey, maybe a millionaire somewhere that can throw $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 at USARK to help us out. So,
I mean, who was a Warren Buffett not too long ago had given away $800 and some million. I mean, he's in the process of giving all of his stuff to charity
away. Yeah,
on his way out to the pearly gates or wherever he's going. But but I mean, just look at the political contributions that people make, man. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. So
that's true.
I am never shy about approaching anyone in that type of position and saying, hey, this is a good cause. We know you do charitable contributions. Let's talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, just like my situation, wanting to get out and do this full time and do the educational events full time. One billionaire watches one of my videos and says, you know what? He deserves a place, cuts me a check for $1 million. We're going down. We're good. Opening a facility, and then I'm going to start doing educational stuff full time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, you never know. You just never know.
Stranger things happen, I guess.
Exactly. The power of social media, man. You never know who's going to watch it.
Absolutely. Well, do you got any last thoughts as we jump off of here?
Man, just first of all, thank you for having me on so we can talk about this stuff. Stay tuned to USARK and USARK Florida. The beginning of the year is always when we see the most stuff coming through. So we definitely want everybody to stay as alert as possible as stuff inevitably, pops up. And so just stay tuned to that. Sign up for the newsletter, become a member if you can. And on a personal note, go look at Amazon tree boas because they're amazing snakes.
That's on my list.
Yes.
As soon as I get room. Of course, I didn't have room for this that I now have. Well, I made room. I just had to slide everything over, but I think that was the lasting. Well, I've got that one more enclosure. Still got to figure out where it's going to go downstairs.
Right.
I've almost got it figured out.
We're reptile people. We can play Tetris really well in our houses.
I know, right? The couch might be history. I don't know.
That's fine. You put the cushions on top of the enclosure. It's fine. You got the couch right there.
It's not a bad idea. That might work.
Oh gosh.
Hey man, I really appreciate you hanging out especially for round 2.
Yeah. No worries, man.
But yeah, man, we'll put more stuff out as it comes out. And,
for sure.
Yeah, like I said, man, anytime you've got anything pertinent that needs to go out for USARK, my platform's your platform.
Definitely appreciate that, man. Thank you very much.
We'll get that stuff out. So I'm going to go out and start editing this thing and get this girl back.
Sweet.
All right, brother. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Cool. Take care.
You too. I'll talk to you later.
All right.